My fusion system, fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapter 291, Trouble for Leon. Young Master Watson, please continue with what you're doing, Leon said to Watson as he went on his way back to the church. He was embarrassed. Leon, I've explained it to you many times. Nightingale and I do not have the kind of relationship you imagined. I drank some wine last night, and then Watson rubbed his head and stopped talking, feeling a little guilty. Leon had seen them when he and Nightingale looked at each other on the bed. He had chased after the man so that he could explain it to him. However, it looked like Leon did not believe him. He had no idea how he had ended up in that setting with Nightingale. Perhaps it was because of Nightingale's unguarded look that touched his heartstrings, or because he was hitting puberty he even had the notion of pushing Nightingale down onto the bed. After all, he has a 30-something-year-old soul from another world. He had not experienced any worldly desires due to his young body, but it seemed like things had changed. That made Watson feel dangerous. He would have hurt Nightingale if he had taken action. He did not think of her as his lover, only a favored friend. He would not get a lover until he could solve the problem with the king of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, and all his family and friends could live a happy and stable life. It seems like I have to keep a certain distance from the opposite sex in the future. Even the maids in my house should not be allowed to rub my back anymore. Watson was in deep thoughts when Leon said, "We're here." That made him raise his head to look upward. At the end of the street stood a huge church. A high tower with a circular spire stood in the center of the church, and a bronze bell stood atop the tower. A man dressed in church clothing stood beside the bronze bell and struck it with a massive mallet. It caused the bronze bell to emit a clear and bright sound. The church had vibrantly stained glass, and there were flower beds and ancient-looking fountains outside. The atmosphere was excellent. Church members in the same attire as Leon went in and out of the church. Watson also saw ordinary citizens who were dressed differently, and they also entered and exited the church in groups of 2 or 3. It looked like they were there to worship the gods. This is the St.A.T.S. Cathedral? This is the first time I've come to a church. Why does the bishop want me here, Leon? Watson asked Leon. He put the matter with Nightingale to the back of his mind for the time being. He had just arrived in the city. The people from the St.A.T.S. Cathedral would not have known about him. He did not know why the bishop would want to see him. This is all my fault. Does young Master Watson know what day it is today? What day is it? It's Monday. Leon was wearing a black prayer outfit that was different from the one Watson had seen him wear. He had a white square scarf on his head, and he held the Book of Devout Saints in his hand. He said reverently, "The Holy See has declared Mondays as the god of light, Baldur's day of birth. Therefore, we come to the church for prayers every Monday morning at 6 in the morning. I brought my new prayer book with me this morning, and the bishop noticed that it was different. He also recognized the runes, and he wanted to study the book for a while. I told him that you were the one who gave it to me, and it was not up to me to lend him the book. So you brought me here to ask for my permission." Watson already understood what he meant even without waiting for him to continue his sentences. Leon nodded apologetically. "That's right, young Master Watson. That's what I had thought. I know that it's not good to hand over the book you gave me, especially when you want me to use it to help you clear the dungeon. But this is the bishop, and he had lent me quite a few things yesterday. I don't know what to do." "I understand. Don't worry, I'll take care of this." Watson smiled and patted Leon's shoulder. He was there for Leon and the church. A priest was one of the 4 major roles in the kingdom, and when Watson had seen Leon's amazing performance in the labyrinth, he had decided to learn more about the role. Furthermore, Leon told him that it was a simple situation. He had only obtained a peak gold tier item, and he had brought it to church during prayer time to show it off. The bishop must have taken a fancy to the item and wanted to borrow it to have a closer look. There was an easy solution to that. In addition, the bishop had lent something to Leon, so he must be a good person. Leon, you took 5,000 gold coins worth of items and money from me yesterday. A day has passed, and since the interest is 1,000 gold coins per day, shouldn't you return 6,000 gold coins to me? If you can't come up with the gold coins, then give me the prayer book with the loan words. I advise you to consider it carefully and not to drag it out. Otherwise, it would become a problem that can't be solved with a loan book. Watson looked at the man in front of him. He was the bishop, and he was wearing a red robe. He held a scepter in one hand, and dug his ears with the other. There was also a long scar on his face. No matter his face or words, Watson knew that he was not a good person at all. I'm sorry, Bishop Waldo. Please give me a few more days. I'm going to the underground city with young Master Watson soon. I should be able to get some precious materials for the gold coins to repay you, Leon said to the bishop with a pleading look. He almost knelt on the spot. Do you think I'll believe your nonsense, Leon? I know nothing about your strength. Even if you had obtained a gold tier prayer book, it would allow you to go to the 20th floor in the maze, and you'll get some materials from the silver tier magical beasts there. I might need to wait a long time before you can repay your debt. The great God of light taught us not to lie, but this is clearly a deception. And you're even trying to con me, the bishop. Either pay the gold coins today or leave the book here with me. You can only choose one. The bishop named Waldo poked the fat on his cheeks as he spoke and spat on Leon's face. Why does it have to be like that? Leon's face was ashen. He had borrowed money from that bishop the previous day. One might say that he had borrowed money from loan sharks. Initially, he had planned to wait for Watson to raise him to gold tier. Then, he would enter the depths of the dungeon to get some materials from gold tier magical beasts. He should be able to pay off the debt easily. However, he did not expect Waldo would take a fancy to his prayer book and was prepared to take it by force. If he had known that earlier, he would not have shown off the peak gold tier item that Watson had given him at the church for the sake of ego. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to regret that then. Also, Leon, did you forget something? When you borrowed money from me yesterday, didn't you say that you had taken a fancy to a beautiful girl and wanted to marry her? Look at what you've brought me. I told you to bring that girl here when you have the payment. You think I'm blind and can't tell whether this person is a man or a woman? So rude. Do you know why I lent you the money? Waldo continued to chatter non-stop, and the blame gradually shifted to Watson. So the bishop only lent money because he coveted Leon's beautiful girl. This feels even worse, Watson thought. Speechless, he walked forward. Bishop, please stop for a moment. Let me explain it to you. I created the gold tier prayer book in Leon's hand. He can't give it to anyone without my permission. Watson thought Leon's friend would be easy to talk to, but it was the complete opposite. There was no need for him to be so polite to bad people. Chapter 292, Cursed Fusion, Instant Death. Kid, who are you? You say you can make gold tier equipment? Who are you trying to fool? Waldo glared at Watson, snorted in disdain, and then turned around to scold Leon. I hate liars, and you have lied to me again and again, Leon. If you want him to pretend to be someone who can make gold tier items, then at least get a decent actor. You can't even spare some money to do that, and yet you want to con me? It looks like I have underestimated you. Anyway, you've signed the contract when you borrowed money from me. If you don't return it in time, then you will have to spend the rest of your life in prison. Bishop Waldo, I didn't lie to you. What I said is true. Young Master Watson is really the person who had helped me to make a gold tier weapon, Leon explained anxiously. If he had not promised Watson that he would not reveal his gold tier status, he would have shown the bishop his skills as proof. Come on, Leon, I don't want to waste time with you. Are you going to return my money or leave the book here with me? Waldo's greedy eyes scanned the book in Leon's hands. The gold-rimmed book was gorgeous and eye-catching, but most importantly, the ancient runes inside emitted faint light around the book caused him to gulp in excitement. Waldo was a bishop, and he had stayed at the peak of the silver tier for many years. Aside from the Pope, the Church had 7 bishops, and other than the first 2, the other bishops were only in the silver tier. Priests had different training than other elites. They did not need to train their bodies every day like warriors, nor did they need to expand their souls like mages. However, they did need to pray daily so that they could move the gods with their sincerity. It was also to strengthen their connection with the gods and to borrow their strength. They would need a special medium and prayer ceremony for that. Therefore, the loan language was necessary. That ancient language of the gods was the best medium. If he used that language for his prayers, it would multiply the effect tenfold. It might even allow him to advance to gold tier in one fell swoop. Waldo's eyes narrowed as he thought about it. Such a precious item would be a waste for someone like Leon. Bishop Waldo, why don't I lend you that book for a few days? I'll redeem it when I have enough gold coins, Leon said hesitantly. It seemed like it was the best way to turn his debt into a mortgage. Cut the crap. It's mine if it's in my hands. And you want to take it back? Dream on. Waldo reached out to grab Leon's arms. Just as he was about to touch the book in Leon's hands, a youthful palm blocked his way. Bishop Waldo, I had made it clear just now. I made that prayer book. If you want it, you'll have to ask for my permission. D*MN, kid. Haven't you had enough? When Waldo noticed the gold tier prayer book in front of him was held back by Watson, he took 2 steps backward in anger and raised the scepter in his hand. Lord Baldur, God of Light, your servant prays to you sincerely. Please punish this ignorant person in front of you. I want to curse him. I want the curse to fester all over his body and bleed from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Silver tier curse, the bleeding curse. As he chanted, a blood-red light lit up on Waldo's scepter. It turned into a red skull and headed straight at Watson. Then, it landed on Watson's body, and a skull pattern appeared on his skin. What is that thing? Watson lowered his head to look at the pattern on his skin. His eyes reflected the information. A silver tier curse, the bleeding curse. It causes the blood in the enemy's body to boil. Within an hour, the enemy's entire body will rot, and they will die. It is most effective against those who are silver tier or below. It is impossible to resist the curse. Bishop Waldo, how can you do that? The bleeding curse is a very powerful silver tier curse. Are you planning to kill someone in the church? Leon's expression immediately changed when he saw the bishop attack Watson. A hint of worry appeared in his eyes. He was not worried if the curse would kill Watson. Instead, he was concerned about Waldo. Watson was the border count's son, and the border count was someone influential at the border. The young man was definitely above the gold tier. His maid, Nightingale, could even send the famous swordswoman, Christina, flying. If Waldo were to provoke him, was he not courting death? Of course, I'm not going to kill anyone. The bleeding curse will take effect within an hour and will only kill its victim after an hour. I'll just let him experience some pain so that he would understand the consequences of bragging. I want to teach him a lesson. When he's in so much pain that he can't take it anymore, I'll remove the curse then. Waldo's voice gradually weakened when he realized that Watson did not show any signs of pain. Instead, he was smiling as he looked at the red skull that had appeared on his skin. It was as if he had discovered some kind of novel toy. This is a curse? How interesting. It seems to contain the power of the demon race and a trace of the law of domain. This so-called curse is a law that has been weakened countless times. The essence of a curse was the same as a blessing. It was obtained by a priest from an individual on a higher plane and then applied to other people. Most beings in higher planes were above the diamond tier, so it was not strange that their power would contain laws. However, the power would be reduced during its transmission to the lower planes, so it would not have the original strength. Thus, the power was reflected as silver tear. Bishop Waldo, the curse you cast does not seem very strong. Do you have a stronger curse? Watson's curiosity in the curse grew as he grasped its essence. He had no desire to borrow the gods' strength. He only wanted to study the rules that governed the gods. Different gods would have their own set of rules, which would be mirrored in the curse. If he could understand the curse and extract its rules, he would be able to fuse it into a stronger one. At that moment, the curse on his body contained a diamond tier rule called the rule of bloodshed. Unfortunately, the content was too weak, so Watson could not grasp it through fusion. You! Waldo was furious at Watson's words. He did not know what the other party was thinking, but he was offended. He immediately waved his scepter fiercely and began to chant a long incantation. Curses flew out of his scepter and landed on Watson's body. Bronze tier curse, bone spur curse. Silver tier curse, heart explosion. Silver tier curse, nerve paralysis. Waldo recited a few curses in just a few minutes, and those curses landed on Watson's body. They covered all of his skin. Some of the curses had black veins, and some looked like red droplets of blood or the faces of demons. Countless curses overlapped. It made Watson's skin look very scary. Brat! Some of those curses will only activate after a few hours, and some can kill people within a few minutes. I want to see if you still dare to complain that curses are weak. Waldo wiped the sweat off his forehead and sneered at Watson. Watson had mocked his curses, so he wanted to let Watson understand real pain. Watson stretched his hands outward to look at it. Then, he shook his head. These curses are still very weak, but considering that you're not that strong, you probably could only do so much. System fusion, activate. Congratulations on successfully fusing more than 50 curses, Master. You have obtained a gold tier curse instant death. With a swoosh, all the curse patterns on Watson's body disappeared with a ray of light, and Waldo's smile froze on his face. Chapter 293, Communicating with the Gods. Gold tier curse, instant death. Effect, cast on the enemy, causing the enemy to die suddenly and unexpectedly. Additional effects, aura of bad luck, significantly reduces luck, guaranteed hit, the curse can't be avoided. Watson opened his right hand. A ball of pitch-black fog floated in his right hand, constantly changing its shape. At times, it would transform into a grim reaper with a sickle and a cloak. At other times, it would transform into a demon with countless heads and hellish hellfire wrapped around its body as a terrifying roar was heard. The curse, which is a combination of many curses, contains a rule that changed from the rule of bloodshed to the rule of death. That rule is very powerful. Unfortunately, as a gold tier curse, the total number of rules contained in it is still too little. It is not good enough for me to master. The rule of death sounded very powerful. If one were to master it, one might be able to control the life and death of all living things. Watson had a better understanding of a priest's role after fusing the curses on his body. He would consider a priest's powers as stolen. In comparison to other roles, that one was considerably easier because no cultivation was required. All that was needed was a devout prayer to the gods and the use of one's faith to exchange for the gods' benefits. How would one feel about that? Just as Watson could generate the blessings of the gods and demons that would allow one to advance to platinum tier immediately, he would not distribute them readily to strangers. However, if someone provided enough money to stir his heart, he would also sell the blessings of the gods and demons. Of course, he would charge differently depending on one's attitude. He could freely provide gifts to those he favored, and he might demand tens of millions of gold coins from those he despised. It was the same for the gods. Even if the priests they liked did not pray to them every day, they would still give them great power. As for the pious priests who prayed every day, they would get nothing from the gods if they could not satisfy them. It made it seem as if the priests relied on nothing but luck, and the role seemed the easiest one out of the four roles. It was no wonder Denise said that priests were the main role in the kingdom when she explained the composition of the kingdom's occupation to him. However, there was one thing that he did not understand. The faith of those in Silvertier and lower should not matter to those powerful gods. Why would they also receive the gods' blessings at all? The benefits they received were few and far between, and everyone who prayed to the gods would get a response. It was hard to imagine how busy the gods would be if they were to do that. Were the gods very free and bored in heaven that they would do that as a form of entertainment? Watson did not know. After all, most of the gods were at Starlight Tier, and he was not even a Diamond Tier now. It was too far-fetched to think about that. "Kid, what did you do?" Waldo stared at the constantly changing fog in Watson's right hand. He was an experienced bishop, so he knew it was a curse, and it was at least Gold Tier. He had cast more than 50 curses on Watson, and he had used almost all the curses he had mastered. He thought that Watson would fall to the ground in pain and beg him for mercy, so he was shocked when that did not happen. Not only was there no pain, but he had also fused all the curses he had released, turning them into a new curse. He had never heard of such a method, let alone seen it before. "You'll know it when you see it. I've fused all your curses into one. By the way, do you believe in the God of Light? It's the bleeding curse, a method that can make one's heart explode. I feel like the God you believed in is more like an evil God." Watson spoke with a calm expression after he snapped back to his senses. He had a Gold Tier curse in his hands, and he had also mastered more than 50 low-tier curses that were used to fuse that curse. He hoped that Waldo could master more curses. If he could fuse those curses into a Platinum or Diamond Tier 1, he might be able to extract the complete rules. D*MNU, brat. You dare to slander the great God of Light, Lord Baldur. He will definitely punish you with a calamity. Waldo rebuked Watson angrily. Then, he turned around and knelt on both knees, opening his arms toward the ceiling of the church, and chanted, "Great God of Light, your humble servant is facing a powerful enemy. I am willing to offer more faith. Please grant me strength." Whoosh! Then, a faint light appeared in the sky. The church's ceiling was initially carved with a mural. The image depicted a man with many light wheels on his back descending from the sky as he extended his right hand to a praying person on the ground. The mural's meaning coincided with Waldo's actions at that moment. Following the light that appeared in the sky, the mural seemed to have come alive at that very moment. The man descended from the sky had a divine glow on his body. Faint golden feathers floated downward, and the face of the man kneeling on the ground and praying had also changed into Waldo's appearance. All who desire power must pay the price. Stray lamb, what price are you prepared to pay for your power? Along with the light, the mural emitted a weak but majestic voice. Waldo appeared to be conversing with the gods. Watson was taken aback when he saw that image. He sensed that the heavenly light in the mural came from a projection of some mythical creature in the sky far above the kingdom. Could priests really communicate with the gods? Watson was interested in that. If he could learn the priest's prayers, he might also be able to communicate with those powerful creatures. "Great God of Light, I am willing to offer my hands and feet to you." Then, Waldo hesitated for a moment before he continued to say, "I have not cut my nails for more than half a month. I wonder if that level of service will satisfy you." The voice in the sky fell into silence. "If you are not satisfied, I am willing to offer my hair. My hair is now longer because I haven't cut it for a month. My wish is very simple. I only need an invincible divine sword or divine punishment to kill the youth in front of me." Swoosh! The light in the sky immediately vanished as if it had never appeared. The distorted murals had also been restored to their original state. "Great God of Light, Lord Baldur, why did you leave?" Waldo looked at the sky with regret. He stood up slowly from the ground, swept the dust on his knees, and looked at Watson. "Kid, consider yourself lucky. The God of Light, Lord Baldur, was too benevolent to agree to my request. Otherwise, you would be a dead man by now." Watson was speechless, but the corners of his mouth twitched. Waldo had wanted to offer his hands and feet in exchange for strength. In the end, he hesitated and offered his nails instead. Finally, he even offered his hair. The god of light must have been unwilling. He must have been upset when his believer offered trash in exchange for an invincible divine sword. The god of light was not angry, he did not even punish Waldo. Watson was very suspicious of how Waldo had obtained the god's favor and his position as the bishop. "Kid, don't be so arrogant. The god of light is the main god that the Holy See worshipped. Other than the god of light, we also worship 6 other gods. Since the god of light has not responded to my expectations, I can still pray for blessings from the other gods," Waldo said harshly to Watson before he turned around and knelt toward the sky. Just as he was about to start praying again, Watson covered his face. He could no longer bear to look at the man. "What's going on? Why is it so noisy inside the church? And Waldo, why are you kneeling on the ground?" Right at that moment, a majestic voice came from outside the church. A man and a woman had appeared at the entrance. Chapter 294, Goodbye, Christina. 10 minutes ago, at a discreet flower bed outside the church. "Pope Arthas, these are the funds that the Holy Sword Adventurer team has prepared for the church this month. They include materials from some magical beasts, prayer clothes, armor, and weapons for holy knights. The total value is about 100,000 gold coins." Christina waved her hand. Her subordinates immediately opened a few large boxes and pushed them in front of an old man in a gorgeous robe and a crown made of jade. The boxes were as tall as a person, and each contained different things. They were placed in a neat line. The light they emitted was enough to dazzle one's eyes. The old man chuckled. "It's been hard on you, Lady Sword Mistress. You have had to lead the adventurer team to conquer the dungeon every day and still need to think of donating money to the church. I really don't know how to thank you." The old man with the crown was none other than Pope Arthas of the F.A.T.C.A.T.S Cathedral in the City of Steel. At that moment, he was stroking his chest-length white beard. He narrowed his eyes and smiled. The wrinkles on his face were furrowed, it made him look kind. "You flatter me, Pope Arthas. The Holy Sword Adventurer team would not have achieved our goals without the priests and talents that you had sent our way. This is the least that I can do." Christina smiled and looked at Arthas, but their expressions did not reveal much about their thoughts. In addition to her exceptional power, Christina did not humiliate her family in terms of social relations. She wanted to grow the Holy Sword Adventurer team into the largest adventurer team in the City of Steel. So, she had a constructive relationship with all the major and minor forces in the City of Steel. They would either supply her with resources or abilities, and she regularly returned some of those resources to them. Everyone benefited from each other. There was not a single person in the City of Steel who was unwilling to cooperate with her. If she had to find such a person, it would probably be Watson. "Watson!" Christina's face flushed with rage as she gritted her teeth and muttered his name. She reflected on the previous night's events at the Golden Quill Pavilion. Watson had exposed her to an indecent situation, and then Nightingale had punched her in the face. There was no wiggle room about it. Either of those two things was a source of embarrassment for her. After she returned to the Holy Sword Adventurer team the previous night, she could not sleep. She had tossed and turned the whole night. When she woke up the following day, dark circles had appeared under her eyes. She blamed Watson for that. "After delivering these things to all the forces in the City of Steel, I'll go to the Golden Quill Pavilion to seek justice from Watson." Christina clenched her fists silently. As the daughter of the Sword Saint, everyone had been respectful toward her since she was young. It was fine if Watson did not want to respect her, but he even sent people to beat her up. She would never be able to raise her head again if she did not deal with that humiliation. "Lady Sword Mistress! Lady Sword Mistress, I'm talking to you. Do you hear me?" A voice interrupted Christina's thoughts. She raised her head and realized that Arthas had spoken to her. He was looking at her with a puzzled face. You seemed a little absent-minded today, why is that? Did something happen? Nothing. I didn't sleep well yesterday, Christina replied with a typical smile of a noble. That's a relief. I thought you were worried about a new adventurer team named in town the Blood Rose. Oh? Does your holiness know about that adventurer team? Of course. A young man named Watson faced your sword head-on and survived it without a single scratch on his body. The news had spread in the city. Even though we don't get many adventurers at the church, we still get a few sometimes, and I heard it from them. Arthas continued to stroke his white beard, his eyes narrowed as if he was still asleep. I also heard that you were in the Golden Quill Pavilion last night and had a big fight with someone. Forgive me for being blunt, the young man named Watson has repeatedly rejected your invitation. He is a little too insensible. Only a kind and generous person like you, Lady Swordmistress, would be so persistent in wanting him to join your team. Your Holiness, you flatter me. I didn't do it out of kindness, but because I value his skills. Since you say so, then I won't say anything else. If you need help, I'm willing to aid you. There are 7 silver-tier bishops in my church, and each of them specializes in a variety of curses. We have many curses that can cause people to become obedient or poisoned to create more chaos. It would be great if you could increase the church's budget by 20% next month. Forget it, Your Holiness. I don't intend to use such despicable methods to subdue my subordinates. Otherwise, I won't feel at ease. Christina pretended to be reserved as she shook her head. However, she complained in her heart. It was not that she did not want to use such methods. Watson was platinum tier. Even she was not his match. Arthas was only a gold tier elite. It would be very difficult for his methods to have any effect on Watson. However, Arthas also reminded her that she was not a match for Watson with the typical methods. She could use some tricks. While Christina was thinking about that, Arthas said, Miss Christina, if you feel that 20% is too much, we can settle with 10%. We can always discuss it. Boom. Just as he was about to comfort Christina, a bright light suddenly appeared in the sky and shone on the top of the cathedral. Arthas and Christina turned their heads to look at it at the same time. Christina looked surprised. Your Holiness, if I'm not wrong, that should only appear when your cathedral is communicating with the gods, right? That's right. Arthas nodded with an ugly expression. The murals in the church's ceiling were carved when it was first built. It can communicate with the gods, but communication is limited daily and consumes a lot of energy. Which idiot communicated with the gods without reporting it to me? Miss Christina, it seems like our conversation will have to be postponed. I want to see that idiot first. End of flashback. Arthas and Christina stood at the door and looked into the church. Watson met Christina's eyes. Lady Swordmistress. Why is it you again? Exclamations echoed in the church almost at the same time. Lady Swordmistress, you know these two people. Arthas' furrowed brow seemed serious when he glanced at Watson and Leon behind Waldo. That's right. Christina nodded with a complicated expression. I'm not familiar with the person next to him, but the person in front is Watson, the one I told you. Lady Swordmistress, what did you say? He's Watson. Arthas exclaimed and began to observe Watson again. He realized that the teenager seemed to be only 12 or 13 years old, but the aura on his body was not weak, especially the black fog in his hand, which appeared to be a gold-tier curse. He was a little surprised. When he heard that Watson could withstand a sword from the Swordmistress, he thought Watson was a warrior. However, it seemed like Watson was a priest. Your Holiness, you came at the right time. This little brat not only insulted the God of Light, but he also attacked me. Please help me teach him a lesson. Oh, right, Leon had brought that little brat here. I suspect that he deliberately brings people to the church to cause trouble. I suggest that we expel him from our staff." Waldo, who had been kneeling on the ground to pray to the gods, stood up suddenly and rushed toward the two of them. At the same time, he turned around and gave Watson a look that said, "You're done." Chapter 295, Breaking the Sky-Severing Blade. Greetings, Pope Arthas and Lady Swordmistress. Waldo rushed toward Arthas as Leon lowered his head and bowed toward the two newcomers. "Leon, is that true? Did you deliberately bring people here to cause trouble?" Arthas asked coldly. He did not respond to Leon's bow. Leon hesitated and replied, "Your Holiness, that's not true. I didn't bring anyone here to cause trouble. Yesterday, I borrowed an item worth 5,000 gold coins from Bishop Waldo. I said I would return it in a few days, but Bishop Waldo told me to pay 6,000 gold coins today. Otherwise, he would take my prayer book. I have no choice but to bring young Master Watson because he was the one who made the book." "What kind of prayer book is worth 6,000 gold coins?" Arthas was in disbelief. "It's this one in my hands." Leon retrieved the prayer book. The glittering surface and the faint illusion of runes on it instantly attracted Arthas' attention. He gulped in excitement. "This is a gold-tier prayer book, and the words on it are, runes." "That's right, they are runes." Watson spoke on Leon's behalf. He carried a large cloud of cursed black fog as he walked in front of Leon. "I created this book, so I have the right to use it. I can give it to whoever I want. This book is a gift I gave to Leon, but your bishop wants to snatch it. I only stopped him for a moment before he was attacked. The curse in my hand is also what he used to attack me." Ever since he entered the church, Watson had not started any fight. "Your Holiness, this is all nonsense. They have wrongly accused me. Please don't listen to him so that you won't be deceived." Waldo screamed as Arthas clicked his tongue in displeasure. He knew that Watson was probably telling the truth because he was familiar with Waldo's behavior. Waldo became a bishop because one of the 7 gods in the Church of Light favored him. He was already at the peak of Silvertier at a young age. "I understand. Since this young man seems to have a relationship with you, Lady Swordmistress, I'll leave it to you to handle him. As for Leon, bringing people to destroy the church is against our teachings. It also goes against the God of Light's commandments. As a punishment, you'll have to hand in your prayer book and then go to the confessional to face the wall for a month." "Your Holiness, this is not fair, Leon's face paled. His lips trembled as he wanted to explain, but Arthas had interrupted him. "There's no need to explain anymore. This matter is settled. That B** starred Leon and that hateful little brat. I told you I'll teach you a lesson." Waldo hid behind Arthas. He looked pleased with himself. Leon clenched his fists in frustration. When he saw Arthas, he thought that he would uphold justice for him. However, Arthas was obviously favoring Waldo because he was a bishop, and Leon was only an ordinary priest. "I'm sorry, young Master Watson. This might delay your plan to go to the underground city." After raising his fists several times, Leon finally put it down helplessly and smiled forcefully at Watson. He could bear to give up the prayer book, but he did not want to go to the confessional and face the wall for a month. That was the purpose of the confessional, it was to punish sinners. Furthermore, it was dark and quiet inside. An average person would not be able to bear it if they had to stay there for a few days, let alone a month. "Leon, I told you, you can leave your concerns to me today. It's all right, you'll be fine." Watson comforted Leon gently, but his face was cold when he turned around to face the other 3 persons. "I heard that the current church is known as the Holy Church of Light, but I don't see any light here. I think this place is not as good as the Demonist Church in the past." "So rude. How dare you mention the Demonist Church? Do you know that they are a group of vicious people? Furthermore, the king had persecuted them personally. If you dare to speak of them in praises, you disrespect the king and the entire kingdom. Do you know your crime?" Arthas took a step forward. His long beard swayed in the wind, and his voice was filled with dignity. If you know your place, then kneel and surrender obediently. Otherwise, you won't be able to bear the serious consequences of what will happen. Arthas had been a pope for many years, so he had an oppressive vibe the moment he opened his mouth. The air in the cathedral hall became heavy. I don't know of any consequences that I can't bear. Why don't you tell me? Watson smiled and gently threw the instant death curse into his right hand. He had not intended to use the fused curse, but if anyone dared to attack his friends, he would not mind the risk of exposing his strength and causing chaos in the city. He would also kill the person who hurt his friend. Since you are determined to go against the Holy See, then I shall teach you the consequences of that choice, Arthas replied in a low voice. However, Christina stopped him just as he was about to walk forward. Wait, Your Holiness! Leave this to me. Lady Sword Mistress, not only did this boy Watson insult our church, but he also insulted and disrespected the king. He has committed so many crimes. You won't protect him, right? Rest assured, Your Holiness. Of course, I won't do that. Christina swore in her heart as she faced Arthas's perplexed stare. She had stopped Arthas for his own safety. If Arthas and Watson fought, only one thing would happen: Arthas would be forced onto the ground, his body rubbed against it. Watson, you troublemaker! Why do you always appear wherever there's trouble? After she calmed Arthas, Christina walked toward Watson and pressed her right hand on the sword at her waist. Unlike the previous night, she was carrying the sky-severing blade that day. She was more confident in her words as she had a platinum-tier weapon with her. Even if she could not beat Watson, she could still stop him for a while. Watson shrugged. Who knows? Maybe it's because I attract disasters. So, Miss Christina, are you going to stop me? I advise you not to do that. I'm not in the mood to play with you right now. You mean you don't want to spar with me? I'm sorry. I haven't sparred with you yet, so it's harder for me to let you go. Christina unsheathed an inch of her sword and said excitedly, I didn't sleep at all last night. I kept thinking about what you did to me. Even though it made me very angry, it also increased my strength a little. Her insomnia was not without its benefits. At least she could repeat the battle with Watson in her head to gain more insights from it. Is that so? Watson asked calmly. Then, he looked at Christian and said, I'm going to attack. Then, he went straight for her. That attack seemed different. Christina did not draw her sword immediately. Instead, she only pulled out the sky-severing blade when he was near her. She slashed so swiftly that Watson could not have dodged it. Platinum-tier sword skill, infinite sword strike. Countless sword auras filled the entire church. Deep sword marks appeared on the church's walls and were spreading outward. Everyone in the church, including Arthas, looked at the attack in awe and retreated outside. There was no doubt that the attack was one that only the platinum-tier elites could display. An unexpected scene happened as they thought Watson would lose and were about to leave the church. The sword aura that Christina released landed on Watson's body. However, it did not even mess a single strand of his hair. Then, Watson stretched his hands outward and pinched the sky-severing blade gently from Christina's hand. There was a sound as Christina took a few steps backward. She stared blankly between the half a sword in her hand and the shiny blade in Watson's fingers. Her jaws dropped in disbelief. The sky-severing blade, one of the 4 strongest platinum-tier weapons in the Holy Dragon Kingdom, had been broken. Chapter 296, Killing a God's Projection. My sky-severing blade is broken. Christina looked at the broken sword in her hand, blinked, and confirmed it once again as if she could not believe it. The blade, which had previously shone with a frigid glow, dimmed at that point, and there were evident fissures in the blade, reminding her that all of that was real. That was one of the 4 great platinum-tier weapons in the kingdom, and while it lacked the strongest defense, it was not easily destroyed. One had to be at the peak of the platinum tier if they wanted to destroy the blade. Was Watson at the peak of platinum tier? Christina knew that Watson was stronger than her when she fought him. However, she did not expect Watson to be that much stronger than her. She finally understood what he meant when he said that he was not in the mood to play. If he were serious, then she might not even be able to block a single move. That was it. Watson let go of 2 fingers on his right hand and allowed the half-blade to fall into the church's smooth ground. Then, he took a step forward. An undisguised violent aura was emitted from his body. The church was filled with a layer of holy power that did not dissipate due to the constant prayers. However, the storm stirred from Watson's body had blown those away. What level is he? Why is his aura so terrifying? Waldo, who was hiding behind F.A.T.C.A.T.S, saw Watson at that very moment. His body trembled. Something suppressed his instincts as if he would kneel at any moment. Even F.A.T.C.A.T.S felt suffocated. As the Pope, not only did he have the strength of a gold-tier elite, but he also often communicated with the gods. His heart was strong, but he still feared Watson. Watson was not tall, but F.A.T.C.A.T.S felt like an ant beneath his feet. If his opponent raised his leg, he could easily crush him to death. Cold sweat slid down his forehead. If Christina had not stopped him, he would have attacked Watson, and if that had happened, he would have died a horrible death. Watson, you! When Watson approached her, Christina's hand that was holding the broken sword trembled. She was about to say something when Watson interrupted her. Move! It was only 2 words, but it was filled with supreme authority. Christina subconsciously took 2 steps backward to make way for Watson, but he did not stop. He walked toward F.A.T.C.A.T.S. Leon is my partner in the Blood Rose Adventurer team, and he's also my friend. Bullying my friend is equivalent to bullying me. You said that mentioning the Demoness cult is disrespectful to the king and the Holy Dragon Kingdom and that it's rude. You also said that I would suffer consequences that I couldn't bear. I want to know about those consequences. Kid, even though I don't know how you broke the sword mistress weapon, but this is the F.A.T.C.A.T.S cathedral, a place protected by the kingdom's rules and the gods. I advise you not to be too arrogant. F.A.T.C.A.T.S was afraid, but he wanted to keep his dignity. You may have misunderstood something. I'm not being arrogant, I'm just stating a fact. If I wanted to deal with someone, then no one would be able to save him, no matter the king or the gods in the heavens. Watson's simple words were like thunder that rumbled in the entire hall. Boom! As soon as his voice fell, the cathedral burst with light. Suddenly, the murals on the ceiling moved on their own. A holy aura fell from the distant stars into the cathedral. It turned into the phantom of an illusory god with countless light wheels behind him. Lowly mortal, you dare to be disrespectful to the gods. The heavens will punish you. Boy, it seems like your words have offended the gods. If you take them back now, it's still not too late to kneel, repent, and admit your mistake. Waldo laughed when he saw the phantom in the sky. Usually, the gods would not take the initiative to communicate with them when they were not in prayer. However, it looked like Watson's words had actually caused the gods to descend. One could tell how disrespectful his words had been. No matter his strength, he would be obedient under the gods' control. Those so-called gods are just a group of existences whose realms and life forms are higher than ordinary people. I don't care if they put on airs in front of other people, but they dare to act so mysteriously in front of me. Watson raised his head to look at the sky, his gaze fixed on the phantom that had appeared in the sky. As he spoke, a halo that symbolized absolute reflection appeared above his head. 6 pure white wings extended from his back, and feathers fluttered down. Amidst the flying holy feathers, the great sin beast's phantom appeared faintly, roaring toward the sky. Holy and evil, light and darkness, completely different powers surged through his body. A platinum-tier magical beast could be called a mythical creature. Watson's body hid more than one mythical creature, the great sin beast and the gods he activated with the 24 astrological tarot cards that he could transform into dozens of mythical creatures. The phantoms of those creatures appeared around Watson as if they were creatures from heaven, and Watson was the king of all gods. The phantom of the god of light, Baldur, looked so much more barren than Watson's phantoms of many mythical creatures. They looked like mortals. I can feel the aura of the angel species. So you are also a person who has stepped into the godly realm, as per the ancient contract. The Holy Dragon Kingdom is under the protection of the 7 gods, including the god of light. If you want to obtain the power of faith, then you should go to the land that has not yet been signed with any contract. You have crossed the line. Power of faith? Crossed the line. Watson shook his head. After the god of light saw his angel form, he seemed to treat him as part of the gods. His words contained a lot of information, but Watson could not understand the context. I have no idea what you are talking about, go away. Watson shook his head and cast the gold tear curse, instant death, that he had been holding in his right hand into the god of light's phantom. He had just fused that curse, so he did not know how to use it properly. The sword mistress was a platinum tier elite, so the curse would not kill her. As for Arthas and Waldo, he only wanted to punish them. It was too much to use the curse on them. He finally found a use for the gold tier curse when the god's projection descended to the mortal land. Swish! When the gold tier curse touched the god of light's projection, it turned black and shattered into pieces. Baldur was a god, so his strength was higher than the diamond tier. However, that was not his true form, it was only an illusion. That was why it could not withstand a single blow from Watson. Your power had fusion rules. You are not merely a mortal who has entered the god's domain, you are. Before he could continue speaking, the god of light's projection had dissolved into dust. As the projection dissipated, the murals on the ceiling cracked open. The originally exquisite paintings were shattered, and the paint on them gradually faded. He killed a god's projection. Waldo screamed during the quake. He could no longer hold it in, and his knees buckled as he knelt on the ground. Even a god was no match for him. Who could protect him from Watson? Chapter 297, The Discussion of the Kingdom's Higher UPS. Something terrible has happened, Your Holiness. Cracks have appeared on all the statues in our church's prayer room. Those people who were in the middle of prayers have all suffered various injuries. And we can't feel any connection with the gods. Not long after the church mural was destroyed, a few priests dressed in black prayer clothes suddenly rushed in from the outside. They looked fearful. Watson was in the bishop's room. Typically, only the Pope and the 7 bishops could enter the room. However, Waldo had loaned money to Leon, and they did not want other people to hear about that. So, even though the fight had caused a big commotion, not many people had gone there. The prayer rooms were used for business. No matter one's identity, they could use the room if they paid for it. Those were the rooms that the priest had meant. What on earth happened? The statues are fine. But how did it crack? And why can't we sense any connection to the gods? Arthas panicked after he heard the report from his subordinates. He gave his orders and then tried to communicate with the gods. Finally, he realized that the gods were not responding to his prayer. His head was dizzy. A priest's authority came from the gods' protection. Without those, they would be nothing. It's him. It must be him. Waldo was scared silly. He pointed at Watson. He must have killed the gods, so the gods no longer protect us. We are doomed. Arthas, Christina, and Leon looked at Watson with a strange expression. Even though Waldo's words were a little crazy, they felt that he was right because they thought the same. Hey, why are you looking at me like that? I only killed a projection, I did not kill the god. The god you believe in won't be so cheap. Just because I killed one of his projections, he cancels his protection for you. Watson spread his hands and defended himself. Let's not talk about that for now. Let's go and check if everyone has lost the god's protection. If someone still has it, let that person pray and see what happens. Arthas could not be bothered to continue pestering Watson. He turned around and ran out, shouting orders. It was a memorable day for the City of Steel, and it was also a distinctive day for the kingdom. All the statues that people worshipped had cracked open, and all priests and cultivators had lost their connection with the gods. The situation lasted for half a day. Although they had established their connection with the god again, all the priests in the kingdom were panicking. What was that inexplicable connection loss? Would it happen again in the future? If it were to happen frequently, they would be in great danger. One could imagine what would happen if they lost their connection to the gods while fighting with powerful magical beasts in the maze. They would not even be able to release any blessings or curses. Under such circumstances, they would most likely end up in the magical beasts' stomachs. Many priests were already considering whether they should switch to another profession. A few hours before that, in the Holy Dragon Kingdom's capital, which was an unknown distance away from the City of Steel. The capital had always been the largest and most luxurious city in the Holy Dragon Kingdom. It was located in the center of the entire kingdom. Tens of millions of residents lived on the vast land, and several small towns spread out in a radial shape. Each town was arranged into a ring shape, and at the end of it was a wall that was more than 100 meters high. There were 9 such tall walls, which formed 9 huge circles that protected the capital. Even if the Holy Dragon Kingdom were breached, the capital would never be destroyed if the 9 walls did not collapse. At that moment, in the royal palace at the center of the city, the upright middle-aged emperor, Landar III, sat on the tall throne. His fingers tapped on the legs of the chair gently as he listened to his minister's reports. Your Majesty, just a moment ago, a riot broke out in the city. An unknown force had destroyed all the statues and idols in the Church of Light. It's not just the city. I heard that churches in the nearby towns were also destroyed. The news from further places hasn't reached us yet, but I've already sent people to investigate. It's obvious that this is a premeditated attack against the church. The man who spoke was in thick black armor. The armor chest was engraved with a soaring golden dragon. He was a human, but that man was at least 3 meters tall. He had a buzz cut, and his face was full of whiskers. He exuded a terrifying aura that was as immovable as a mountain. The man's name was Hone, and he was one of the platinum-tier elites in the kingdom. His nickname was the Kingdom's Wall. He was not only a swordsman, but he was also proficient in earth elemental magic. He could create 9 layers of barriers with just a sword, and they would not be inferior to the high walls outside the kingdom. He was also the commander of all the soldiers in the kingdom. General Hone, are you sure that this is an attack on the church? Or has something gone wrong with the gods? If someone wanted to attack all the churches simultaneously, they would need a spell that could cover an area of millions of kilometers. At the same time, they would also need to conduct a test to prevent it from hitting anyone other than the churches. General, do you think that you can do that? The moment Hone's voice fell, another white-haired old man in the hall, who was leaning on a cane, asked in puzzlement. The old man's name was Makrotov. He was the kingdom's only prime minister, and he was also a well-known intellectual. If Hone was the leader of all the generals, then Makrotov was the leader of civil officials and ordinary nobles. Makrotov, don't be ridiculous. The gods left this world because they were too powerful. So, they went to a wider realm. No one can attack all the churches at the same time. Perhaps it was someone who can affect the gods. Hone glanced at the old man. Report. The civil officials and generals had always been on good terms. They had different thinking because of their different origins. It was the same case with the 2 leaders. Someone must have attacked the churches in the kingdom. General Hone's guess is correct. He didn't say that one person had done it. Maybe it was a gang? I suspect that it was done by the remnants from the Demonist Church. They are still holding a grudge against the church because their sect was destroyed. You're wrong. If one person did not do it, how could they strike at the same time? Even a well-trained army wouldn't be able to strike at the same time from a great distance. Furthermore, the church's defense forces in other cities are also different. How did those terrorists sneak into the city? It is even more impossible to say that it was done by remnants from the demonist church. Back then, His Majesty had personally sent people to destroy the demonist church. Do you doubt His Majesty's ability? In my opinion, Makrotov's guess is more reliable. Under the leadership of those two people, dozens of civil servants and generals in the hall were divided into two factions and began to quarrel violently. Cough. Cough. At that moment, they heard a cough from the hall. The sound was not loud, but it had suppressed all the discussion in the hall. The man sitting on the throne stood up. A few maidservants held his long imperial up. Everyone lowered their heads, not daring to look at the face of the kingdom's ruler. I have asked you to discuss the attack on the church's statues, but you are only discussing the reason. That is not important at all. What's important is the result. The attack on the churches had caused all the priests in the kingdom to lose their connection with the gods. Everyone is waiting eagerly for a solution. I only want one solution. Do you understand what to do next? The thick voice spread evenly throughout the hall, bringing pressure to everyone who heard it. Even someone as powerful as Hone could not help but break out in a cold sweat. He said, His Majesty has taught us that we'd be stupid to argue over useless things. 1 hour. I will only give you that much time. If you still haven't found a solution when the time is up, then I will have no choice but to remove a group of useless people from the hall. His calm words caused the temperature in the hall to drop by quite a bit. One would feel as if an ice cellar would pierce their bones. Chapter 298, The Terrifying King. Your Majesty, the strategy has been devised. Makrotov's plan is for the generals to dispatch personnel to each city to investigate any unusual characters. And they wanted to find the astrologer who had been absent for a few months. The astrologer had the star tarot cards, which can be used to establish contact with the gods and study one's future. At the very least, the astrologer's tarot card provides an opportunity to communicate with other gods and ascertain what is going on. If that fails. It had been more than half an hour since the talk in the hall. Hone stood in a magnificent bedroom, his head lowered as he looked at the king, who sat cross-legged on the bed in loose casual attire. The king, who had just reprimanded his ministers in the hall, held an ancient scroll in his hand and was reading it slowly. His impeccably groomed face was not as commanding as that of a common ruler. Rather than that, it was delicate and beautiful. Except for a few strands of white hair at his temples, the remainder of his hair was pale gold. Two barely clad women sat cross-legged behind the king. One of them massaged the king's shoulders and legs, while the other carried a fruit dish and delicately peeled the fruit before placing it in his mouth. If Vermilion Town's acting mayor, Lafayette, were there, he would undoubtedly exclaim in amazement, for the woman peeling the fruit was none other than Adele, Vermilion Town's former mayor. Of fact, Adele's real name was Emma. Emma's face was lavishly adorned. As she fed the king, she murmured, coquettishly, Your Majesty, this is a unique fruit grown near the border. It is known as the crystal grape. I purposefully brought it here from Vermilion Town. Don't you think it's delicious? It's not bad. King Landar III nodded as he chewed on a grape. His gaze was fixed on the book in his hand. So, Hone, what are you trying to say? What are those civil officials going to do if they can't reach the gods using tarot cards? If that fails, Your Majesty, we can only change the church's beliefs, just as you did 10 years ago with the demonist church. This may take several months and may wreak havoc on the kingdom. But it is our last resort. That was all to it. Hone's voice was barely audible when he noticed the king had closed his book abruptly. Two palpably icy gazes were directed at him, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. As the king's confidant, he was there to speak with the king, following the parliament's conclusion. He knew how the king worked. Anyone who disobeyed him would face a fate worse than death, as he had witnessed far too many times. As a platinum tier elite, he was obligated to show his respect for the king. Your Majesty, I didn't mean to mention the Demonist Church. It is all right, Hone. As far as I am aware, you have worked diligently and never slacked off. I have no intention of blaming you. The icy gaze ceased. King Landar III straightened his shoulders and rose from his bed. I'm surprised that Makrotov would think this way. After all, the royal family has long dominated the Holy Dragon Kingdom's rule. In recent years, the Holy See's strength has grown too swiftly, to the point where some people are already dissatisfied. Those are Makrotov's ideas. I wonder about your views on the matter. Your Majesty, my thoughts are similar to Makrotov's, Hone replied after a few moments of hesitation. As the commander of the generals, he was not very gifted with the use of his intellect. Additionally, Makrotov's strategy was flawless, and he could not think of anything to improve it. He was unsure whether such a reaction would enrage the king, so he peeked at him nervously. Suddenly, a palm landed on his trembling shoulders. Hone, you have been by my side for a long time. You have been with me since I was a prince, haven't you? Do you know why I have given you the position as the commander? I understand. Your Majesty wishes to prevent the formation of parties and private interests among the country's great noblemen, which would result in an imbalance of power endangering the imperial power. Sweat trickled down Hone's brow, but he refrained from wiping it. So you do know. And your answer to the question just now was similar thoughts to Makrotov's. Is that so? I apologize, Your Majesty. I believe that Makrotov's and the others' plans are a little out of place. I would like to return to them and have a good talk with the generals to ascertain the weaknesses in their plans. Hone was well aware that he did not get his position by being friends with the king, but the king had wanted a pawn to oppose civil officials and the noblemen. His role was to challenge civil officials, no matter what the other party said. There was no need for him to have his own judgment. That pawn could be called Hone or any other name. Your Majesty, you've frightened Commander Hone from the time he approached you. He appears to be sweating profusely. If this continues, I believe he will not be able to talk. Why don't we change the subject and let him unwind? Emma rose and set the fruit platter down behind King Landar III. She leaned in close to him and spoke in a sweet tone. That is quite reasonable. King Landar III shifted his gaze to Emma's nose and poked it. He leaned back in his bed and positioned himself across from the sofa. Hone, we are old acquaintances. There is no reason to be so formal in my presence. Take a seat. Certainly, Your Majesty. Hone sat down. He had not dared to wipe his sweat until then. As my most beautiful treasure, Emma, is there anything you would like to share with me while you were at the border? Certainly, Your Majesty. I've discovered some extremely dangerous signs near the border. Oh? What signs? I saw the Dragonspine Snow Mountain collapsed. Not long after that, a mysterious path to Vermilion Town was paved with platinum tier ore. The path led to an incomparably gorgeous mountain peak that appeared to include more than half of the areas on the border. Emma leaned against the side of Landar III, her pupils dilated with a tinge of panic. I am not exaggerating, Your Majesty. At the border, the entire landmass has flown into the sky, and underneath it is an endless sea. She gave a quick account of what she had witnessed at the border. Her description was centered on Black Moon Town and Watson. King Landar III listened intently. Are you claiming that the tremendous transformation at the border is connected to Black Moon Town and a youngster named Watson? It is unusual that the border count would suddenly compel all villages to submit to Black Moon Town. After all, Black Moon Town is a relatively new force, and Watson is the town's youngest and most brilliant young master. He was barely 10 years old that year. According to what I have heard, he is related to the border count. Emma wanted to continue, but the king patted her shoulder abruptly. Emma, you have been talking for such a long time, you must be exhausted. Go to the store and purchase some fruit wine. Then he turned around and cast a glance at another maid. Emma and the other woman exited the bedroom quietly, nodding respectfully. King Landar III grimaced as he watched Emma leave. He chuckled. Platinum tier or paved road, a divine mountain in the sky. What significant events? The former queen's younger brother appears to be rather energetic. Even the people I sent to deal with the magical beasts in the winter could not divert his attention. And what role did the young man named Watson have in it? Emma had moved back here before she could complete her task. Moriarty, on the other hand, had been successful in destroying the Dragonspine Snow Mountain. But his soldiers had vanished. An ordinary person can't kill a peak platinum tier elite. Additionally, someone at the border had created a seventh element that did not belong to the world. Even the astrologer who had not stepped a foot outside the Temple of the Stars in recent years were drawn to the border. It appears as though there have been some unexpected changes at the border recently. King Landar III was preoccupied with a thought. His brilliant eyes clouded abruptly. By the way, Hone, are you unhappy with me for allowing Emma to stay at the border for so many years? Of course not. Really? After all, Emma is your daughter. You must think me cruel. No. Hone shook his head. Emma is not my biological daughter. We do not have that kind of connection. That's true. After all, you were the one who killed her biological father. His calm words blew into Hone's heart like a cold wind. He could only smile sourly. The king would always expose one's deepest scar inadvertently. When he told Emma and the other woman to leave them alone in the room, Hone knew that he did not do it for any good intentions. There was no doubt that the Holy Dragon Kingdom's ruler was adept at manipulating other people's hearts. Chapter 299, If you don't believe in God, you can believe in me. Young Watson, I am so sorry for what just occurred. If I had known you were related to the border count, I would have apologized on behalf of F.A.T.C.A.T.S. Cathedral. Arthas crossed his chest, bowed to Watson, and laid his hand on his chest. It had been half a day when the statue in St. Cathedral collapsed. Arthas' attitude toward Watson had shifted dramatically in less than half a day. When he discovered Watson's connection to the border count, he also learned that Watson was a genius. He was a genius who would go to the Royal Knight Academy. Additionally, he had assisted the church in repairing the broken statue. To be more precise, it was not just a simple repair. At that moment, Watson and the others were in a prayer room in the cathedral that was mainly used to entertain distinguished guests. 7 statues stood behind Watson. The main one was the god of light, Baldur, who had previously projected himself to them, and 3 gods stood on his left and right, respectively. There were males and females, and each possessed a unique aura. That was not the main point. The stone sculptures had all turned into golden statues. They had a gold tier aura. They were all gold tier items. It was not just those sculptures. All the statues in the cathedral had turned into gold tier items. They were all created by Watson with the wish for the world ring. There were at least 100 statues in the cathedral, and all of them had turned into gold tier items. It was equivalent to having more than 100 gold tier items out of thin air. With such a gift, it was difficult for Arthas to be disrespectful to Watson. Perhaps Watson's actions had extinguished the god's anger. It was not only St. Antilles Cathedral, but all the damaged statues in the other churches had also been automatically repaired. Waldo, why don't you come here and apologize to young Master Watson? It's all your fault, you idiot. You're a clergyman, but you can't get rid of the greed in your heart. You even blackmailed your subordinates. A person like you isn't worthy of a cardinalship. From now on, you'll revert to an ordinary priest. After you apologize, you can go to the confessional and reflect on yourself. I'm sorry, young Master Watson. I was wrong. Waldo, who had acted very arrogantly half a day ago, knelt in front of Watson with a bruised and swollen face. He looked regretful as he took a contract and tore it. This is the contract for Leon's debt from yesterday. I've torn it apart, we're not even, Leon. Waldo looked pained as he tore the contract. If it were up to him, he would not have done that. However, Arthas had cast the silver tear-beaten curse on him a few hours ago, and it had been too painful. It had only been a short while, but he felt as if more than 10 men had beaten him up. If that continued, he would not be able to withstand it. Young Master Watson, I don't know if you are satisfied with that. If you are not still satisfied, I will continue to punish Waldo severely, Arthas asked cautiously. Watson expressed sympathy for Waldo. He shook his head as he looked at him. That is not something for me to decide. You should ask Leon that. Are you satisfied, Leon? Watson directed the last sentence to Leon, who was standing next to him. I am satisfied. After all, I took the initiative to borrow the money. Let Bishop Waldo go, please, Leon said weakly. Leon, thank you for speaking up for me. You are a good person. I am sorry for being so harsh on you. When I come out of the confessional, I will treat you to a drink. Waldo forced a smile at Leon. It seemed like he had made up his mind to turn over a new leaf. No one knew if he would say the same thing when the curse was lifted. Leon, there is something that I might need to trouble you. The St. Cathedral has always had 7 cardinals since its foundation. These 7 cardinals will be the jury to judge the church's affairs. Now that I've removed Waldo from his position, I have decided to give the position to you. What do you think? Arthas might have asked for Leon's opinion, but his eyes kept glancing at Watson. Of course, letting a bronze-tier priest become a bishop is slightly against the church's rules. My actions might make others feel dissatisfied. If young Master Watson could transform our statues into gold-tier ones, then perhaps those voices of opposition will be a little quieter. The pity in Watson's eyes had all but vanished. He was speechless. He mocked the man in his mind. It seemed like the leader and his subordinates were the same. Waldo had been greedy for wealth, and the Pope was not much different. I'm sorry, Your Holiness. Thank you for wanting to promote me, but forget it. I don't intend to become a cardinal. It's not only that, I also intend to withdraw from this church. After a few seconds of silence, Leon dropped a bombshell on them. Leon, what are you talking about? Are you confused? Leon looked determined as he faced Arthas's disbelieving query. Your Holiness, I am very clear-headed. That is the choice I made after much deliberation. Thank you for your training over the years. With a deep bow, Leon looked at Watson. Young Master Watson, let's go. On their way to the Golden Quill Pavilion, Watson asked, Leon, why did you make such a sudden decision? Is it because you felt like you owed me and didn't want to see me subjected to Arthas's blackmail? Leon pushed his monocle upward and smiled bitterly. It's not only that, young Master Watson. I made that decision on my own. I didn't expect you to be so powerful that you could crush the platinum-tier weapon in the sword mistress' hand and even kill a god's projection. I think you are a platinum-tier elite, but I've always thought that you are only a gold-tier professional. You made a potion to raise our level to gold tier, so how could you only be on the same level as us? Watson did not say anything, which indicated his tacit agreement. I became a priest because it was a noble role and because it was pretty easy to cultivate. However, I now realize that these priests are no different than ordinary people. Furthermore, there are drawbacks to this profession. Once you have a problem with your faith, you won't be able to exert your power. Borrowed power is ultimately not as substantial as the one gained in cultivation. Leon walked toward Watson and knelt on one knee. Young Master Watson, I have decided to abandon my previous faith and give up the priest profession. I hope that you will not mind my weak strength and become my master. Teach me magic or swordsmanship, and in return, I am willing to give up everything for you. There was something he had kept to himself. It was better to believe in Watson than the gods. Even the gods could not make him into a gold-tier elite, but Watson had done it with only a bottle of potion. If that were the case, why would he still believe in the gods? What was that? Watson was at a loss for words when he saw Leon's serious expression. He did not expect Leon to abandon his clergy profession to become his disciple. He was still learning from his master. After he thought about it for a moment, Watson said, "It's fine if you become my disciple, and I don't want you to give up the clergy profession." The light in Leon's eyes dimmed, and his expression became exceedingly disappointed after receiving a negative response. "I don't want you to abandon your priestly role, but you can shift the object of your faith from the 7 gods to me." Leon was astonished for a few seconds, and then he abruptly raised his head. His face was blank. Hey! Chapter 300, The Journey to Godhood with Faith. "What's wrong, Leon? Is what I said too difficult to understand?" Watson asked. "It is indeed a little." Leon nodded in a daze. "Young Master Watson, you asked me to believe in you. I'm a little confused." He could not understand. It was one thing to believe in the gods. He could pray to the gods in the prayer room and burn incense for them. What could he do for Watson? Would he need to pray to Watson in the same way? "It seems like I was not clear enough, let me put it this way. You can treat me the same as how you treated the gods of your faith. Because I can do what the gods can do for you. Young Master Watson, I'm not an educated person. Please don't lie to me. Don't worry about it, just try." There was an unfathomable expression on Watson's face when he heard Leon's incredulous question. Even though Leon did not believe Watson, he still maintained his half-kneel position. He crossed his hands in front of his chest. "Great God! Great Master Watson, I am your humble servant, Leon, and I am here to offer my faith to you. I am willing to become your servant and walk this world on your behalf, just like how you would walk in your kingdom. Please give me courage and strength." As his voice fell, Leon maintained his praying posture. He did not have any other reaction. That was a common way to pray to the gods, and most beginner priests used it. Why is this person kneeling on the ground? Is he praying for the church? Is he sick? He is wearing a priest's outfit, but he is praying to a child. Are they playing some shameful roles? Passers-by gave Leon an odd look and discussed it animatedly. Leon's face reddened when he heard their discussions. He felt as if Watson had toyed with him when he asked him to do such shameful acts in front of so many people. If there were a hole nearby, he would jump into it. It was all Watson's fault for using the fusion magic to raise their level to gold tier with the potions. He was so shocked by the potion's efficacy that he thought that Watson was omnipotent. He had no problem with replacing the god of his faith with Watson, but he had an issue with his age. He was too young. No matter his strength, he was only a child. How could he compare to a god? "Young Master Watson, I'm sorry. I really don't." Leon struggled to get up. He wanted to say, "I can't do it." However, at that moment, a tender hand touched his forehead. "My servant Leon, I have received your request. Now, I will bless you." Watson caressed Leon's forehead and spoke with his eyes closed. His body emitted a divine radiance, and behind him, there seemed to be projections of many gods. Leon was drawn to Watson. Then he felt a strong and holy force enter his forehead, rapidly coursing through his limbs and bones, and warmed his heart. His mind had been crammed with a great deal of knowledge. Boom! Leon's body erupted with a muffled, peak gold tier aura. He opened his eyes slowly, and he had a look of disbelief on his face. Then, he lowered his head and looked at his hands. I've advanced to peak gold tier." That was not what astounded him, it was the knowledge in his mind. It was unfamiliar to him, but he had information about absolute explosion, absolute seal, absolute defense, and many others. He did not understand all of them, but they seemed very familiar. Those abilities could be divided into curses and blessings that gold tier priests could use. Did young Master Watson give me this knowledge? Leon quickly reacted and looked in Watson's direction. He had not had any knowledge about that, but the information had appeared in his mind after Watson touched him. There was only one possibility. At that moment, Watson was enveloped in a divine light. He muttered, "I see, I understand." Then, he opened his eyes slowly. A layer of color appeared in his initially clear and bright eyes, just like the fog that floated on the river in the early morning. It gave him an additional hint of reverence. "Now, I understand why the gods would establish a church in the mortal country and grant their followers requests." Watson opened his eyes. He felt the source of the chaos elemental magic hidden in his soul had suddenly increased in capacity. It had risen from diamond tier to peak diamond level. Furthermore, a life force had appeared in the source. Previously, Watson could only expand the source by absorbing energy. Then, the source seemed to have a life of its own, spontaneously absorbing the energy from the outside world to evolve. At the same time, Watson felt a soul aura around the magical source, and that aura belonged to Leon. The man had prayed to the gods all year round, so his soul habitat flickered with a faint golden color and emitted a strange fluctuation. It made Watson feel very comfortable, and his brain worked faster too. "System, help me test this power." "Yes, Master." The test was successful. Special energy, power of faith. Effects: special energy produced by the souls of living beings, divided into different levels like iron, bronze, silver, and starlight. The power of faith has the effect of increasing the host's ability and cultivation speed. At the same time, the host can use the power of faith to obtain all 5 senses of the prayers and give a part of their own ability. The higher the quality, the stronger the effect. Additional effects: the kingdom of God's construction. The power of faith is the raw material to build a divine kingdom. No wonder I can push the rules I control into Leon's mind and see myself through his eyes. With that thought, Watson extended his soul into Leon's power of faith and immediately saw himself. He also saw the shocked gazes of the people on the street behind him. A few dining passers-by were unaware that the food in their hands had fallen to their feet. Leon, who had just prayed to Watson in front of those passers-by, must have been a jester. However, when those passers-by sensed Leon's peak gold tier aura, their perceptions shifted. Regardless of who promoted Leon, they no longer saw him as the clown. Instead, they saw him as a strong person with a personality. "It seems like I have gone too far." Watson reclaimed the soul that had infiltrated Leon's power of faith. Then, he reached out and grabbed Leon's shoulder. A teleportation array with a space transfer layer appeared beneath his feet and sent them away, leaving a group of confused passers-by on both sides of the street. They rubbed their eyes as if they had seen a ghost. Whoosh! Watson appeared in the Golden Quill Pavilion with a hand on Leon's arm with a light sound. He seemed excited. He was already doubtful when he was the god's projection in the church. Why would such a powerful existence interfere with mortal creatures? Therefore, he was prepared to let Leon pray to him. It would be great if it worked, and if it failed, he would take it as a joke. He could also compensate Leon for it. Fortunately, he had succeeded. He had obtained the secret of the gods. In general, a starlight elite would be sufficient to become a god. Since the gods were too powerful, they were forced to leave the continent. However, they still used various methods to influence the people there. There was only one reason for that: they needed the power of faith to build a godly kingdom. A divine kingdom is something that only starlight tier elites can achieve. Obviously, it's more advanced than the rules for the diamond tier elites. Even though I'm still so far behind, and I don't know what it's for, there's no harm in collecting the faith in advance. Watson clenched his fists and made up his mind. In addition to clearing the maze in the City of Steel, he finally found another reason to be there.